Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we're covering part 7 of the Brothers War set review for Limited and Constructed, and this 7th part covers all the artifacts. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. First up for the artifacts are the commons, and our first card is Aeronaut's Wings. For 2, it's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has flying, and you can equip it for 2. Yeah, I think this is a fairly decent card for limited, especially when you get stuck in ground war stalemates. This is a card that will break that stalemate, allowing you to go over the top to attack your opponent, or even be good use to stymie your opponent's attacks if they're attacking you from the air. So I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. Just give it a low rating for constructed. It's a decent card to use, maybe in Commander or something like that, but I could see getting the bulk of its uses in the limited formats. Our next card is Energy Refractor. For 2, it's an artifact. When Energy Refractor enters the battlefield, draw a card. You can pay 2 colorless to add 1 mana of any color. It's a good cantrip card. I think I'd give it a low rating though for limited. Anytime you're having to pay 2 mana to get 1 mana, that's usually not a good trade-off unless you're desperate. Usually you're losing by then, but it is an artifact though, and that might help you with certain artifact-related triggers, things like that. But it's probably not something that I would start in my draft deck or sealed deck right off the bat. Just depends on how you build your deck, what type of deck you're playing. Same thing for constructed. I could see this getting some good use in Commander, but aside from that, really just not being used in any of the other constructed formats. So I think we'll go low across the board for both limited and constructed for Energy Refractor. Our next card is Goblin Firebomb. For 1, it's an artifact. It has flash. You can pay 7 and tap it, and then sacrifice Goblin Firebomb to destroy target permanent. Yeah, I mean, this is a removal element that you can use in limited. It is a little pricey to pay 7, but you get enough Power Stone tokens that kind of helps to offset the activation cost for this. And it is kind of cool that it does have flash too, so you can kind of treat it like a instant speed removal spell. Although to cast it and pay for the activation cost all at once, that's 8 mana. So you definitely have to have a good mana base stored up in order for you to get the use of this card all in one turn. That being said, I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited. There are other removal spells that you can be able to use, and unless you're playing just something artifact heavy or you need additional artifacts on the battlefield, it's gonna be a while before you're able to really use this spell. And same thing for constructed. I can see this being used in Commander for sure. Commander usually has a lot of cards like this that are useful to use as utility cards against your opponents. So it's something I could see you just throwing out on the battlefield and letting it sit there until you need to use it. Same thing for limited. Threat of activation is a real thing, so just as long as you're getting close to the mana to be able to use it, should be fine. But overall, probably give it a low rating for limited and constructed. Our next common is Mine Worker. For 2, it's an artifact creature, assembly worker. 2/1 power and toughness. You can tap it to gain a life. If you control creatures named Power Plant Worker and Tower Worker, you gain 3 life instead. This is pretty cool. Looks like they have a series of assembly worker artifact creatures that are similar to the Urza's lands that came out all those years ago, and it looks like they have some of the similar benefits. I could see this being pulled off a lot easier in a draft deck for limited versus a sealed deck, just due to the fact that you're going to be exposed to a larger card pool, which gives you access to a greater amount of cards to be able to draft the 3 different assembly workers you're going to need to make them work. In sealed, it could be a little tougher. And so, I don't know, I think until I know how common this is to pull off, I think I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, and we'll just go mid rating for limited. For constructed, I'll probably just I'll go low with that. Unless you have a dedicated assembly worker artifact style deck, then it might be worthy of a mid rating. But yeah, I think we'll go mid or low. And I'll just say if it as the format develops, if it's tough to be able to pull off this mine worker, power plant worker, tower worker assembly, it might be worthy to think of it as a low rating. So we'll see how it goes though, once the set is released. Our next card is Power Plant Worker for 5. It's an artifact creature, assembly worker, 4/4, power and toughness. You can pay 3. Power Plant Worker gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If you control creatures named Mind Worker and Tower Worker, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Power Plant Worker instead. Activate only once each turn. I like this card as looks like it's the muscle of those assembly worker trio. It seems pretty decent even just by itself, so that's a good thing. I think I'll probably give it this a mid rating for limited, and it looks like it gets even better if you get your hands on a tower worker and a mine worker. For constructed, I'll do the same thing. I'll probably just give it a low rating, same rating as the previous assembly worker, and maybe if you have a dedicated commander deck or something like that, then it might be worthy of a mid rating, I think. But for now, just go mid for limited and constructed. Our next card is Stone Retrieval Unit for 4. It's an artifact creature construct, 2/3 power and toughness. When Stone Retrieval Unit enters the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. That's pretty cool. It's cool it's an artifact and it also spits out a Power Stone token, and it's common. So that might be something that could become pretty useful as the game goes on. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. This is something I could see that gets better in multiples. The more you get of these, you get one onto the battlefield. Theoretically, the next one you cast will be 1 cheaper because you can use the Power Stone that you got from the previous one to cast your additional one, and so forth. So that's something to think about. The cost essentially gets cheaper and cheaper, and plus it lets you use those Power Stone tokens for other artifacts and activated abilities and such. For limited, for constructed, I'll just give it a low rating. Just not something I would see being used that much in a constructed deck. Maybe a commander deck, some kind of mono artifact deck, or some kind of ramp deck that casts really huge, large artifacts. So that would be pretty cool there for that kind of theme. But I think we'll go mid for limited, low for constructed. Our next card is Supply Drop for 3. It's an artifact. It has flash. When Supply Drop enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And then you can pay 4 and tap it to sacrifice Supply Drop to draw a card. I think this card might be sneaky good. I like the fact that it's for 3. It's a +2/+2 combat trick. And then later on, when you need to draw the card, you can pay 4 and tap it. And it also might give you some bonuses or help you with certain triggered abilities that benefit from sacrificing things. So this might be something that's kind of useful. At first glance, it doesn't really seem like it would be, but I think this card has a really good utility. So it's something, I think I'd give it a mid rating. I wouldn't mind putting it in my draft deck, and I'd like it in my my sealed deck as well. So I think it's pretty decent. For constructed, I'll give it a low rating. Just due to the fact that there's a lot more I can do with 3 mana for a non-creature spell, but maybe in a dedicated artifact deck it has a greater use. But I think we'll go mid and low for limited and constructed for Supply Drop. Our next card is Swift Gear Drake for 5. It's an artifact creature Drake, 2/4 power and toughness. It has flying and haste. When Swift Gear Drake enters the battlefield, put up to 1 target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. It's kind of pricey at 5, but it's a 2/4 body. It could serve its purpose, but I think there might be better 5-drops that you might be able to use. I think it can be pretty decent as a sideboard card to bring it in to get rid of something from your opponent's graveyard, put on the bottom of their library if it's causing you problems, or to help you retrieve maybe something in your deck, and then you have a way to shuffle your library. So Something to keep in mind there. I think I'm going to give it a low rating for limited, though. I think if it was 4, it might be a little better, or had just an additional point of power to it that might be worthy of a mid rating, but could be wrong. It does have the evasion, so that's always a good thing. But I think for now, we'll just give it a low rating for limited. Same thing for constructed, just due to the priciness of its mana value. That's really the big knock against this card. Otherwise, I think it's a solid card. But it's just, there are other things that you might want to spend your mana on for 5 mana. So we'll go low across the board for Swiftgear Drake. Our next common is Tower Worker for 3. It's an artifact creature assembly worker. It has 1/3 power and toughness. It has reach, and you can tap it to add colorless. If you control creatures named Mind Worker and Power Plant Worker, add 3 instead. Yeah, I think this is pretty solid. I think same thing as the other assembly workers. I think this will be pretty decent in draft if you can pull off the trio. It'll be easier to pull off in draft than it is in sealed. And then once you get access to that 3 mana, that could put you in business pretty easily to cast some really big things. I do like the fact that it has reach as well for 1/3 reach, and it's a mana rock with the possibility of being a really big mana rock. So pretty cool card. I give it a mid rating for limited. I think for constructed, I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for constructed. I think it's something that it's of the assembly workers, this one probably has the most utility, and mainly if the reason I give it a mid rating is because of if you're able to do something with it in Commander. Even if you don't have the other Mind Worker and Power Plant Worker, you might be able to do something with it, since it's essentially a mana rock for 3. And you never know, this might actually be something that's playable in a full-blown constructed deck, standard or pioneer or modern. So it'll be interesting to see, since it's a creature that generates a lot of mana. So I think for now I'll give it a mid rating. Might just see how it plays out, and might be something less, might be something more. We'll just have to see as the format develops. But for now, I feel comfortable going mid across the board. Okay, so moving on to the uncommons. Our first uncommon is Argivian Avenger for 6. It's an artifact creature shapeshifter, 5/5 power and toughness. You can pay 1, and until end of turn, Argivian Avenger gets -1/-1 and gains your choice of flying, vigilance, death touch, or haste. Yeah, I think I like this for limited. I think you can get some good use out of it. Most of the time, you'll probably be using the flying or vigilance option. Death touch could be used too if you're going up against a creature that you want off the battlefield. The one I could probably see being used the least is haste, just due to the fact that if you want to give it haste, you're essentially paying 6 plus the 1 for the activated ability and giving it a -1/- counter, or -1/-1, and it's essentially paying 7 for a 4/4 with haste. Yeah, to finish off your opponent, you could do that. I could see that being used then, but overall, though, I think the flying and the vigilance will be what you'll be using the most. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think I'll give it a low rating for constructed. I think it's a little too expensive to be used in constructed, maybe in Commander, but yeah, I think it's a decent attack body or defending body for something you'd use in limited. Our next card is Levitating Statue for 2. It's an artifact. It has flying, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Levitating Statue. You can pay 2, and Levitating Statue becomes a 1/1 construct artifact creature until end of turn. That's pretty cool. You could, if you had this, you could play a pretty heavy non-creature based deck. This would go really nicely in a prowess deck. So something to keep in mind. You have all those creatures that get the prowess triggers, but also this artifact will be getting those +1/+1 counters, and you just pay 2 to turn it into a 1/1 construct that's boosted by all those counters. So yeah, it's pretty good. I give it a mid rating for limited. Even if you're not building a prowess deck, you're going to probably have a few non-creature spells in your deck, and getting a few triggers on the Levitating Statue, 2 or 3 triggers that'll make it a a 3/3 or a 4/4, that's something that your opponents will have to deal with. So I like it as a mid rating. Constructed, probably give it a low rating. Although if you're playing some kind of heavy control deck, or basically a deck that's not an aggro deck and doesn't have many creatures, this might be a card that you have that's included within the deck that you can use later on as a win condition against your opponent. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think overall, we'll go mid for limited and low for constructed. Our next card is Reconstructed Thopter for 3. It's an artifact creature, Thopter, 2/1 power and toughness, has flying, and then it has Unearth 2. Yeah, this is an efficient flyer. For 3, you get a 2/1 flyer, and then if you can Unearth it again to get one more attack out of it. I think I'd give it a mid rating for limited. This is a body I would probably definitely place in my limited deck, just due to the quick, efficient evasion. And you could probably modify it by enchanting it or something like that, and maybe get in a few more extra points of damage. Probably give it a low rating for constructed. Just a little too fragile for 3 mana for that kind of artifact creature. But I like it for limited though. Next card is Slagstone Refinery for 4. It's an artifact. Whenever Slagstone Refinery or another non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, or is put into exile from the battlefield, create a tapped Power Stone token. It's an interesting card. Yeah, this is a card that actually would probably get a lot of triggers from the Unearth mechanic. When you exile your Unearthed creatures after you've brought them back from the graveyard, this would trigger and you'd get a Power Stone token. So that's just something to keep in mind. Also, if you have any other non-token artifacts that are put into the graveyard or exiled, you'll get something like that. So you have a bunch of artifact creatures that die. That'll trigger this, and you'll get some more Power Stone tokens. So I think it's a useful utility card, especially with Unearth. So, and that could help you get more Power Stone tokens to cast other big things or pay for other abilities. So not a bad card. It's definitely a build around. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think it's decent enough where you could probably use it for the right type of deck. And I think because of that, its utility, I'd give it a mid rating. For constructed, it's hard to say. I think for constructed, I think I'm going to give it a low rating, but it's right on that border between low and mid. It definitely has a lot of uses. If you have a specialized sacrifice deck that uses a lot of artifacts, non-token artifacts, or things that are exiled, it'd probably be a solid mid for that card. But I think for now I'll probably go low for it in constructed. Our next card is Spectrum Sentinel for 1. It's an artifact creature soldier, 1/2 power and toughness, has protection from multicolored, and whenever a non-basic land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you gain a life. Pretty interesting card. You're not going to really see this much in limited for this particular set. Not many multicolored cards that you're going to see at the common level, and there's a few at the uncommon level, but not nearly as much as previous sets. And then I like it for constructed though. It's a good sideboard card you might be able to use and take advantage of a lot of decks that use non-basic lands, so it's a good life gain source. So probably mid for constructed. Next card is Steel Exemplar for 5. It's an artifact creature wizard, 4/4 power and toughness with trample. Steel Exemplar enters the battlefield with 2+++ counters on it unless 2 or more colors of mana were spent to cast it. So basically you'll get the +2 or you'll get the 2+++ counter bonus if you spend a single colored mana to cast it. So a monocolored mana. I definitely like this for limited. And for the most part, it's kind of easy to I would think to pull off. Even if you're playing a pretty evenly balanced 2-color deck, you just dedicate for one turn, just dedicate 1 color of mana to casting this creature. And it's an artifact creature, so not all of the mana you spend has to be colored. It could be colorless from the Power Stones, and just as long as 2 or more colors were not spent to cast it. So it's something to keep in mind. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. I think it's a solid beat stick for limited, and it's a card that you would be more than happy to put in your deck. For constructed, probably give it a low rating. Unless you have it in a monocolored deck, I don't really see it being used much. But in a monocolored deck, or artifact deck, could be pretty decent. Be a 6/6 trample for 5. But overall, I think you'll see most of its play in limited. Next card is Suchi Cave Guard for 8. It's an artifact creature construct. 8/8 power and toughness. It has vigilance and ward 4. That's pretty good. When Suchi Cave Guard dies, add 8 colorless. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. That's pretty good. If it does die, you're able to utilize that mana on maybe more artifacts or activated abilities. This could be a real problem if once you get onto the board for your opponent, and it's a giant wall essentially that can attack because of the vigilance rating or ability. I think I'll probably give it a mid rating for limited. The only thing that really keeps me from putting it at high is its mana value. That's a pretty expensive price for it, so it's not going to be anything you're going to see in the early game unless you get lucky and you just have an amazing draw of mana in limited. I think I'll probably go low in constructed, unless you have some kind of way to cheat it onto the battlefield sooner than its mana value is. Getting it out sooner than turn 8, say reanimating it from the graveyard, or just ramping it out sooner than it would normally get onto the battlefield. But other than that, I think I'll probably give it a low rating for now. Maybe in a specialized deck, it'd be worth it for a mid rating for it. But it's kind of where I feel it stands for Suchi Cave Guard. Next card is Symmetry Matrix for 4. It's an artifact. Whenever a creature with power equal to its toughness enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. Interesting. That's pretty good. There are several creatures that have equal power and toughness, so this could be a pretty good draw engine for you. Creature tokens come to mind. Soldier creature tokens is a good example in limited, which I think is something that could take advantage of this. That being said, there's many creatures as well that don't have equal power and toughness, so you really got to be careful when you're playing this card what kind of creatures you have. Otherwise, you only get a few triggers off it. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited, and probably do the same for constructed. You probably have an easier shot at pulling off the trigger and paying 1 in constructed than you do in limited, but it would definitely require a conscious build around to make that work. So I think, yeah, we'll go mid across the board for limited and constructed. Next card is Thrawn Power Suit for 2. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each aura and equipment attached to it and has ward 2. And the equip cost is 2. So at the very least, it is you can equip this onto a creature and it gets +1/+1 and ward 2. The +1/+1 is counting itself. But anything else you get just adds to it, so that's pretty decent. I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. It's a good equipment card, but it's not over the top, but it's something that could get pretty wild if you have the right build around for it. Same thing for constructed. I think you put it in an enchantment or a deck or equipment deck, that's when you get the most use out of it. Plus, there's those creatures that let you search for equipment and attach them to things, and also things that allow you to get bigger creatures based on the amount of equipment or auras attached to them. And this just falls right into that. So I'll probably give it a mid rating for constructed, but if you had a build around for it, it'd be worthy of a high rating, because that ward tacked onto it's pretty nice. So we'll go mid for limited and mid for constructed for Thrawn Power Suit. Okay, moving on to the rares. Our first rare is Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter for 3. Legendary artifact creature Thopter has flash, flying, power and toughness 1/2. And it says you may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. It's pretty cool. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter's power, put a +1/+1 counter on Liberator. Yeah, that's pretty solid. I mean, most of those spells you cast are after a certain point are going to be larger. It's going to be interesting, especially in a kind of like an artifact heavy deck where you've got a lot of big creatures. So I could see this being really good in Commander. It does have flash and flying. That's really good too. I think I'm going to give it a high rating for limited, and I think I'll do the same for constructed. This card could be crazy nuts in something like Commander or something like that, and if you have the right curve for your constructed deck, it'd be pretty decent in Standard or Pioneer. Limited, the same deal. If you're playing a lot of artifacts, you can flash those onto the battlefield, and if they're larger mana value than Liberator's power, you're going to get a good benefit. The fact that it has evasion is really nice, so you really has a solid impact for being able to attack with this creature with a bunch of counters on it. So I like it. High for limited, high for constructed. So our next card is the Meld card. Before we review this, let's do a quick review of the card that it melds with. And that card is Urza, Lord Protector. We reviewed this card in the multicolor video, but I'll just go over it one more time. Urza, Lord Protector for 1, a white and a blue. It's a legendary creature, human artificer, 2/4 power and toughness. Artifact, instants, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and you can pay 7 to act for the activated ability. And if you both own and control Urza's Lord Protector and an artifact named the Might Stone and Weak Stone, exile them, then meld them into Urza Planeswalker, activate only as a sorcery. And so for the artifact, the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, legendary artifact Power Stone, when the Might Stone and Weak Stone enters the battlefield, choose one, draw 2 cards, or target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. And you can tap it to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. This mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. And then it melds into Urza Lord Protector. So that's pretty cool. So if you own and control both Urza Lord Protector and the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, you can use those abilities, but then after you activate Lord Protector, it gives you the Urza Planeswalker. And that card reads like this. So we have Urza Planeswalker. Legendary creature Planeswalker Urza for 7 loyalty. Has a static ability of you may activate the loyalty abilities of Urza Planeswalker twice each turn rather than only once. That's really powerful. And he has 5 loyalty abilities. First one says +2 loyalty, artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast this turn cost 2 less to cast, you gain 2 life. You can activate +1 loyalty to draw 2 cards, then discard a card. You can do 0 loyalty to create 2 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. You can -3 loyalty to exile target non-land permanent. And the last one is its ultimate. You can do -10 loyalty, artifacts and planeswalkers you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Destroy all permanents. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Really powerful planeswalker for Urza. I think it does him justice for how powerful we've heard he was. It's kind of neat to see him finally get a card, even though it's a meld card. That's really powerful. So I think it's definitely worthy of of a meld creature though, and the slot for using mythics and rares for it. So going back to these cards, I think I'm gonna go ahead and I do like it. It's gonna be tougher to pull off for limited, so I think by themselves I'd give them a high rating each, and because individually they do have some pretty strong abilities, and then when you meld them it gets even more powerful. The Might Stone and Weak Stone just by itself is a pretty good utility card. Draw 2 cards, or you can use it to get rid of something large on the battlefield, and then after that it's a mana rock for artifacts and activated abilities or any additional costs. So that's pretty solid. I think for constructed, I'll probably give it a high rating as for constructed. I give it a high rating as well. Although both of them transform or meld into Urza Planeswalker, which I think is probably an epic level epic level planeswalker, and it's definitely a threat you'd have to deal with. So I think the two front sides for the Might Stone and the Weak Stone and Urza Lord Protector, it'd be a high rating. And then if you were to meld both of those cards, I would go an epic rating for both of them, with the Urza Planeswalker. So be exciting to be able to get this to meld into that. That'd be a pretty fun game to play out and see how it went once he entered the battlefield. So pretty cool card, though. I definitely like it. Our next rare is the Stasis Coffin for 3. It's a legendary artifact. You can pay 2 and tap it and exile Stasis Coffin. You gain protection from everything until your next turn. Yeah, that's pretty solid. It's pretty much don't touch me for a turn cycle, and they can be pretty good in Commander, especially. I think I'll give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. This is a card that can buy you some time, and for a full turn cycle, that's pretty good, especially in Commander when you're trying to survive through multiple opponents' turns. So, solid card. I like the flavor behind the Stasis Coffin. It's pretty neat. Our next card is the Stonebrain. It's a legendary artifact. You can pay 2 and tap it and exile Stonebrain. Choose a card name. Search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. Activate only as a sorcery. Yeah, that's a pretty decent way to... I guess you could say it's a cheap way for you to take care of some threats your opponents have that are really causing your problems. I'd give it a high rating for limited. It's only 2 mana to get onto the battlefield, and then 2 to activate it. So 4 mana total if you want to pull it off in a single turn. Giving it a high rating in limited because your opponent's not going to have a full 4 copies of a single card most of the time. They might every once in a while, but usually those will be for commons, maybe uncommons. I'm going to give it an epic rating for constructed. This is a way to silver bullet your opponent. I could definitely see this being brought in from the sideboard, kind of like its ancient predecessor, the Jester's Cap. Works in a similar way, but this appears to have a lower mana value, and you can use it to get rid of cards that are just wrecking your deck. I know there's probably several people that would like to get rid of Shieldred, the Apocalypse from Domino United, or those that really devastating black sorcery, Invoke Despair. With your opponent not being able to resolve that spell because you've exiled it already, it can be a pretty powerful effect and maybe just give you enough of an advantage to push you over the edge to victory. So we'll go high for limited and epic for constructed for the Stonebrain. Next is Thrawn Spider for 3. It's an artifact creature spider, 2/4 power and toughness. It has reach. When Thrawn Spider enters the battlefield, you and target opponent each create a tapped Power Stone token. Interesting. You can pay 7 and look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Yeah, I like it. It's a decent 2/4 reach creature just for 3. That's pretty good by itself, especially in limited. And you get a Power Stone token. So does your opponent. But the activated ability, once you have enough mana, you'll be able to do this every turn and start putting extra cards, digging at the top of your library and digging for extra cards to put it in your hand. That's an artifact. So I'll go high for limited, and I think I'll do the same for constructed. I think in the right deck, this card could shine, especially in Commander. So pretty decent card. A lot of utility for just 3 mana. So we'll go high for both limited and constructed. So now we're on to the Mythic Rares. And our first Mythic is Cityscape Leveler. For 8, it's an artifact creature construct. 8/8 power and toughness with trample. When you cast this spell, and whenever Cityscape Leveler attacks, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a tapped Power Stone token, and you can unearth it for 8. Yeah, this is pretty crazy. When you cast it, you'll be able to destroy at least 1 item, and anytime it attacks, it destroys something. Reminds me a lot of Eldrazi Titans from way back in the Zendikar sets. So really solid. I'm going to give it an epic rating across the board for that. Just due to the fact it is expensive at 8 mana, but if you just make sure to have just maybe 1 or 2 extra lands in your deck, and maybe have some Power Stone tokens to help you out there, you might be able to cast this sooner than turn 8. And the fact that it unearths for 8 as well is really nice. It's Trampley with an 8/8 power and toughness. That's solid, and then you'll just be destroying stuff. So, and if you're able to, when you cast it and then an attack from the unearth ability, that's 2 things you can destroy in a single turn. So yeah, this is pretty epic in size, and I guess it's kind of worthy for the flavor of the card. Is it's Cityscape Leveler, so it's kind of what you'll be doing. You'll just be leveling your opponent's city. So definitely a solid card, epic for limited and constructed for Cityscape Leveler. Next card is Portal to Phyrexia for 9. It's an artifact. When Portal to Phyrexia enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. And at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. If it's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Yeah, it's pretty solid. Its only drawback is it's cost 9 to cast, but when it enters the battlefield, your opponent has to sack 3 creatures, and then at your upkeep, you can put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And the longer that stays on the board, the more creatures you're going to get to come to your side. So give it an epic rating for both limited and constructed. Like I said, the only drawback is it's 9, but it seems like the Brothers War set is giving us a few tools to help us get some of these large things out quicker, namely Power Stones. So that's something to keep in mind. And there's some mana rocks and a few mana generating creatures that you can use. That's just within this set. So in Commander, this should be a lot easier to get out with all those mana rocks you have. And in Constructed for Standard or Pioneer, playing just a few extra lands and some other mana sources, this will get it out pretty quick too. So I like it. Epic across the board for Portal to Phyrexia. Seems scary. So looks like we've come to the end of the artifact cards. Only 2 mythics for the colorless artifacts, but they're pretty powerful. They're both worthy of an epic rating. So I think they can be really destructive. They remind me a lot, as I mentioned earlier, they remind me a lot of the Eldrazi effects that you would get from Battle for Zendikar, or even the original Rise of the Eldrazi. So I'm sure people will find creative ways to get those onto the battlefield, especially in Constructed and Commander. So I think that'll do it for this one. Our next video will be the final video in the series, and that'll be the lands. It'll be a shorter one since there aren't that many lands in the set that are non-basic, but should be fun to review. But I think that'll do it for this one. Until next time, till then, take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.